There are days when my body is awake, but my soul is asleep. The world moves, but I am unmoved. Smiles pass me, but none reach me. I answer questions, but I feel unheard. I laugh, but I am not amused. I move through the noise, but I carry silence inside. This is weariness, not of muscle, but of meaning. It is not caused by late nights or long roads. It is the tiredness that comes from holding in the tears, from pretending to be strong when you're falling apart, from answering, "I'm fine," when you're anything but. We live in a world of performance, but the soul does not perform. It aches, it whispers, it groans beneath the weight of unseen burdens. It asks questions the mouth cannot shape. Where do you go when the inside of you collapses? The books give facts, the friends give advice, the mind gives logic, but nothing touches the ache that comes from within. I have tried to climb out of it, tried distractions, tried ambition, tried perfection, but I found that no ladder built by man can reach the soul's pit. And just when I have no more prayers, no more strength, no more strategies, there in the stillness comes the lift. Not a voice, not a flash, not a spectacle, but a presence, gentle, certain, silent, but undeniable. It does not erase my pain, but it redefines it. I am not flying away, I am being lifted up. And there is a difference. To be lifted is not to escape. It is to rise above. My circumstances remain, but I am no longer beneath them. My fears exist, but they no longer own me. My fatigue lingers, but it no longer leads me. I am carried not by my resolve, but by something eternal, like eagles who do not flap in panic, but soar in trust. I look down, and what once towered over me now looks small. I see the valley, but I am no longer in it. I remember the pain, but I am no longer trapped by it. It is not strength that lifted me. It is surrender, a letting go of control, of pretense, of self-reliance. And in that surrender I found arms stronger than mine, wings wider than my worries. And I learned this: he who lifts the soul never grows weary. Even when I do again and again, his strength is not a burst of energy. It is a quiet faithfulness, a presence that doesn't shout but stays, a hand that doesn't yank but guides. In the days when I feel I cannot go on, I do not rise because I am strong. I rise because I am carried. When my soul is weary, he lifts me on wings like eagles, not to run away, but to rise above, not to deny the struggle, but to be redefined by grace in the middle of it, and that is where I find my rest. Not all exhaustion is visible. Some weariness never shows up in our faces. It doesn't wrinkle the skin, it doesn't slow the legs, it hides deep in the chest where the world cannot see. You get up on time, you get dressed, you go to work, you nod in meetings, you reply to messages, but inside something is folding, quietly, repeatedly. This is soul. Tiredness. The kind that doesn't scream for help, but simply fades little by little. You don't even remember when it started. Maybe it was after one more disappointment, one more betrayal, one more plan that didn't work, or maybe it wasn't one thing, just the slow erosion of hope, day by day. You begin to feel like you're running on fumes, like your inner world is always in winter gray, silent, waiting for a spring that doesn't come. And the strange thing is, no one suspects it, because you are still functioning, still productive, still fine. But functioning is not the same as flourishing. There is a weariness that no rest cures. You can sleep for 10 hours and still wake up tired. You can sit in silence and still hear noise. You can be surrounded by people and still feel alone. This is not weakness. It is not laziness. It is not something that can be fixed with motivation quotes or protein shakes. It is the body keeping pace while the soul falls behind. You begin to forget what joy feels like, not because you don't want to be happy, but because the moments that should bring joy pass through you like wind. You can see beauty, but you cannot feel it. You start avoiding stillness. Because in the silence the ache gets louder, you distract yourself not to live but to survive, the scrolling, the noise, the endless doing, not because you're busy, but because you're afraid of stopping, because when you stop, you feel the weight. And sometimes the weight is unbearable. Thoughts you bury during the day come alive at night, and so you keep moving faster, hoping maybe motion will save you. But it doesn't, because what's tired is not your schedule. What's tired is your soul, and no vacation can fix that. No weekend, no shopping spree, no night out, no new hobby, no podcast, because these things can only reach the surface, and this weariness is rooted far beneath. You begin to feel disconnected not from people, but from yourself. Like your own soul is a stranger. You hear yourself talk, but the words feel rehearsed. You laugh, but it feels borrowed. You smile, but it doesn't reach your spirit. You want to scream or cry or disappear, but you don't, because you've become too good at pretending, too good at surviving the day, too polite to interrupt others with your pain, too scared to be vulnerable, so you keep walking, carrying a soul that feels heavier with every step. This is the weariness no one warns you about, the exhaustion of existing without direction, the pain of hoping without reward, the fear that maybe, just maybe, this is how it'll always be. You tell yourself, be grateful, and you are, but gratitude doesn't cancel fatigue. It only helps you carry it with dignity, and even that becomes exhausting, because sometimes the soul just wants to rest, not on a couch, not in sleep, but in peace, in meaning, in purpose, in something deeper than a schedule and a task list. And that's when the questions begin to rise. Is there more to this life than duty? Is there a place where the soul can breathe again? Can I be lifted, or must I always carry this alone? These are not questions of philosophy, they are cries. They come not from the intellect, but from the center of being, and when the soul begins to cry, it is no longer satisfied by logic. It needs something eternal, something beyond the grind, the mask, the effort, something or someone who sees the invisible weight and lifts, even when we no longer know how to ask. When the soul grows weary, it withdraws, not dramatically, not with noise, but quietly, like fog slipping into a valley, unnoticed, unannounced. You find yourself in a strange place, not lost, but not fully present, not broken, but not whole either, a space between functioning and fading, and you carry on because what else is there to do? This is the hidden valley of the weary. You walk it with shoes on and a smile painted on your face. You laugh at jokes, nod at wisdom, go through routines, but inwardly it's silent, heavy, thick, like a fog that never lifts. People say you're strong, and you nod because explaining the truth would take more energy than you have. They say you're always so composed, and they don't know that's because you've forgotten how to fall apart. In this valley, you don't feel panic. Panic would mean feeling something. You feel nothing, not despair, not hope, just a gray, stretched middle, and the strange thing is no one notices, because everything outside you looks normal. You perform well, you speak clearly, you handle life, but your soul, it's slumped in a corner somewhere whispering, I don't want to do this anymore. You don't tell anyone because you don't want to burden them, or because you've tried before and they said you just need more faith. Or worse, they offered clichés dressed as comfort, so you become quiet, not out of peace but out of resignation. You begin to live like a shadow of yourself, not broken enough to scream, not strong enough to soar, just existing, one foot in front of the other, one day at a time. The valley becomes your norm. You memorize the shape of the fog, the rhythm of the numbness. You stop looking for the exit, and that's the most dangerous part, because when you no longer expect to be lifted, you stop hoping altogether. You adapt. You build a life in the shadows. You become skilled at small talk and social scripts. You pour your energy into others so they don't look too closely at you, and deep down you wonder, is this just life now? Will the weight always stay? Will I always feel this flat? And you fear the answer, so you avoid the question. You distract yourself with busyness, projects, plans, obligations, not because you're driven, but because stillness might reveal what you don't want to see. But in the quiet moments it returns. The ache, the hollowness, that low, dull hum of something's not right. You go to bed tired not from activity, but from pretending, and you wake up tired because the mask is waiting, and you already know how heavy it feels. This valley is not evil, but it is empty, and the emptiness begins to feel normal. You lower your expectations, you adjust your hopes, you stop asking for more. You stop praying not because you don't believe, but because you're not sure he's still listening, or maybe you're not sure you'd believe him if he answered. Because pain reshapes the way you hear promises. In the valley, even light feels suspicious. You flinch when good things come because you're waiting for them to leave, and yet you're still here, breathing, walking, carrying that invisible weight that counts for something, because it means even in the silence, some small ember in you hasn't gone out. You may not see the mountain ahead, but your feet still move. You may not feel strength, but something or someone is sustaining you anyway. And that's where the story turns, not with a loud rescue, not with fireworks or revelation, but with a slow realization. Maybe I'm not alone in this valley. Maybe the silence is not emptiness. Maybe it's a presence too gentle to interrupt. Maybe what I thought was abandonment was actually a quiet kind of faithfulness. And maybe, just maybe, the lifting doesn't start with soaring. It starts with noticing that I'm still being held. Maybe I'm not alone in this valley. That was the thought, small, quiet but different. A flicker where there had only been fog. A sense that something or someone had not let go. But even then I tried to fix it myself. I told myself, you just need to try harder, push through, get up, be stronger, because that's what we're taught, isn't it? That the answer is always within us, that discipline will cure despair, that effort will solve emptiness, but the soul is not a machine. You can't reboot it, you can't force it to run on low battery forever, you can't motivate your way out of heartbreak. I tried, I made schedules, set goals, created new routines, I read the books, I watch the talks, I tried to hack my healing, but healing is not a system, and I am not an algorithm. There are no shortcuts out of soul, weariness. So I pressed on, woke up early, journaled, took walks, but I was still tired, not in body but in being. I did everything the world said would make me whole, and yet the ache stayed, not because I lacked effort, but because effort cannot reach the depth where the soul is wounded. You begin to realize willpower has limits, not because you're weak, but because you were never meant to carry this alone. Human strength is beautiful, but it is not infinite, and when the soul is bleeding, courage cannot replace comfort, strategy cannot replace presence. I tried telling myself, you've been through worse, but pain doesn't compete. What hurts now, and what hurt most wasn't what happened, it was the silence afterward, the echo of trying to hold myself together when all I really wanted was to be held, but admitting that felt like failure, because the world tells us to be strong, to man up, to move on, to keep smiling, keep producing, keep impressing, so we bury the need for help, we disguise it as independence, we say, I'm okay, when the truth is we're just afraid to be seen as not enough, and that fear, it becomes a second weight, heavier than the first, because now you're not just tired, you're pretending not to be, but one day the pretending cracks, not loudly, not publicly, maybe alone in your room, or in your car staring at the steering wheel, or in the middle of a conversation when your voice shakes for no reason. That's when you realize you've reached the end of yourself. And strangely, that's where things begin to change, not with a grand solution, but with a simple confession, I can't do this alone. That's not weakness, that's clarity, that's honesty, that's the first real breath after holding it in too long. Because the soul was never designed to power itself, we draw from others, from connection, from the divine, from the unseen strength that carries what we cannot lift. And in that moment when we drop the performance, something unexpected happens. We are not crushed, we are not scolded, We are not shamed, we are met, not with noise, but with presence, not with instruction, but with stillness, not with answers, but with arms. The strength we could never produce begins to surround us, and slowly, gently, we start to rise, not because we found the secret, but because we finally admitted we couldn't save ourselves. And that humility became the doorway, the turning point, the moment weakness became holy, the moment surrender became sacred. I thought I needed more strength, but what I needed was to stop pretending I had any left, and in that surrender I began to feel something I hadn't in a long time, lift. And in that surrender I began to feel something I hadn't in a long time, not a rush, not a miracle, not fireworks in the sky, just lift, barely noticeable at first, like someone nudging the corner of a heavy box you've carried alone, like a whisper that doesn't interrupt, but waits to be heard. No thunder, no shaking ground, just a subtle, steady strength that wasn't mine. It didn't arrive when I was strong. It came when I had no words left, when I wasn't asking any more, when I was too tired to pray beautifully, and all I could manage was, please. That's when it came, not the kind of strength that pumps adrenaline through your veins, but the kind that steadies trembling hands, the kind that lets you breathe without performing, the kind that holds you, even when you fall silent. I realized then grace is quiet. It doesn't shout for attention. It doesn't demand perfection. It doesn't show up when you've earned it. It shows up when you've collapsed, and it carries, not like a rescue helicopter that swoops in and removes the pain, but like a shepherd that walks beside you, even in the shadow. It lifts without hurrying you, not up to the mountaintop, but just enough to see that you won't stay buried forever. There's no dramatic shift, just a moment when you realize you're no longer dragging yourself through the day. Something or someone is walking with you now. You look back at the weight you were carrying. It's still there, but it doesn't feel as heavy, not because the burden changed, but because you are no longer alone beneath it. This is what the world doesn't teach. That help isn't always loud, that healing isn't always fast, that sometimes the miracle is not in the removal of pain, but in being sustained through it. I used to think rising meant I had to fly, but rising, I've learned, sometimes means simply not falling further. It's the day when you cry and feel peace in the tears, the moment you sit in silence and realize it no longer scares you, the breath that finally feels full, not forced. That's the uplift. Gentle, unrushed enough, and strangely it doesn't begin with power. It begins with presence, not a feeling necessarily, but a certainty, a quiet awareness that you are not forgotten, not abandoned, not unseen. When you're too weak to climb, you don't need someone to shout from the top. You need someone to sit beside you until your legs return. That's how he lifts, not always with motion, but always with mercy. He doesn't demand movement. He provides it, one step, then another, not because your strength returned, but because he became your strength. I didn't suddenly become whole. I didn't wake up fearless. I didn't stop hurting, but I did stop sinking, and that was enough for day 1. Day 2, I rose a little earlier. Day 3, I really laughed, and it surprised me. Day 4, I remembered something I loved and reached for it again, not out of pressure, out of permission, because the uplift wasn't in proving anything. It was in receiving what I couldn't generate, comfort, peace, grace, strength, and none of it came loudly. It came like wings, not the kind that flap with panic, but the kind that rise on wind you cannot see. I stopped trying to force my healing. I stopped demanding clarity. I started trusting the slow, sacred rise, and somehow, without noticing it, I was no longer in the valley. I was above it, not because I climbed, but because I was carried, and somehow, without noticing it, I was no longer in the valley, not because I sprinted, not because I mastered the map, but because I was lifted, not out of life but into it, not out of pain but through it, and that difference changed everything. I used to think rising meant escaping, that to soar I had to be far from the trouble, far from the memories, far from the weight, but it turns out soaring has nothing to do with distance. It has everything to do with perspective. The pain didn't vanish, the questions still lingered. The same world awaited me, but I was seeing it from above now, not in pride, not in ego, but in clarity. From above, the valley looks different. What once felt endless now has borders. What once felt consuming now looks small compared to the sky. What once trapped me no longer defines me. I didn't forget what I walked through, but I no longer feared it, because the lift didn't erase the past, it redefined my place in it. I used to believe healing meant erasing what happened. Now I understand it means remembering, without being ruled by it. The scars are still there, but they no longer sting. They remind me not of the fall, but of the lift, and I began to see the beauty of what had once broken me. The cracks in my story, they let in light I never noticed before. The silence I once hated, it taught me how to hear again. Pain became my teacher, not my identity. And the valley, it became sacred, not because it was easy, but because that's where I met the strength that wasn't mine. So no, I didn't fly away. I wasn't rescued by fantasy. I was grounded even in my rising. Soaring isn't fleeing. It's staying with peace. It's standing with presence. It's facing the same life, but from higher ground. You can still hear the voices, the deadlines, the doubts, the daily noise, but they no longer drown you, because now you know who holds you, and you begin to see others still in their valleys, and you don't pity them, you recognize them, because you were there too. And soaring isn't superiority, it's solidarity. It's not wings that boast, it's wings that carry quietly, faithfully, above the storm, not removed from it. I still live in the same world, but I live in it differently now. I no longer need to escape to find peace. I no longer need to fix everything to feel safe. I no longer need to explain myself to feel understood. I am lifted not out, but above, above the weight of expectation, above the lie that strength means silence, above the fear that I am only as valuable as my performance. And from here I begin to speak again, but softer, because now I know the power of gentleness. I begin to feel again, but deeper, because now I know what numbness costs. I begin to hope again, but quietly, because now I know that real hope grows in hard soil. This isn't escape. This is transformation, not a disappearance but a reappearance, the same soul, the same life, but now lifted, not because I fixed everything, but because I stopped trying to fix what was never mine to carry alone. And the air up here, it isn't thinner, it's clearer. I can see the path, I can see the valley, I can see others trying, crying, surviving, and I can whisper to them from the sky, you will not stay down there forever, because I didn't, not because I had wings, but because grace found me and lifted me gently, slowly, faithfully on wings like eagles.